Os! Welcome back to the Singing Samurai. Today's video, what is the one thing you should consider before opening your own private voice studio? Stick around, find out. So what is it? What is the one thing that we should all consider before opening our own studio? Our ego. That's right. Maybe it's what you were thinking, maybe it wasn't. Let me explain a little bit further what I mean by that. I was taking a walk today thinking about this video and listening to a lecture on personality. And there was something really profound that was said. And I'm going to read it and make sure I get it right. Your value system determines the direction of your perception. Your value system determines the direction of your perception. What does that mean? Well, it means what we choose to focus on is what we're going to end up valuing. And what we value, we're going to end up choosing to focus on. One way of thinking about this is, if you choose to see the bad in somebody, maybe your value system is you don't like lazy people. So when you see something that seems like it's lazy, and you focus on all the things that confirm for you that person's lazy because you value hard work, and when you see laziness, irks you. Or maybe you really value kindness and warmness from people. And so, when you have a student that's really kind and warm and loving, you see that in them, and you see them as a better person. And in and of itself, these things aren't wrong. If somebody is being lazy and we need to correct that attitude as a teacher, we should. And of course, it's wonderful to have students who are very warm and nice. The problem is when our ego gets involved. So let me explain that a little bit further. Egotism takes many forms. There are some obvious ones, and then there are some that are much more subtle. And I actually think the subtle ones are the ones that lead to more problems for students and more things for people to consider when it comes to finding the right teacher, or as a teacher to consider, am I really being effective in a positive way? So I'm going to detail some of the obvious ones, and then I'm going to go into some more of the subtle ones. Before we do that, though, I think it's important for us to understand the mantle that we take on as a teacher, maybe the mantle that we want to take on versus the one that's actually given to us. I think that most people that go into teaching in general, they genuinely want to help educate people, to give them opportunities and advantages to grow in their own lives, either in the subject that they're studying or using that as a model for other subjects of study or what have you. There are some people, unfortunately, that go into teaching because they want to be an authority. They want to have that power over somebody else. And I don't think that most of the folks that go into education crave that, or not right away. But I think it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting that feeling because you do get authority when you become a teacher. You get enormous authority, and your words carry enormous weight. And this is because of the mantle that we get placed upon us, which maybe isn't the mantle that we ask for. So I think most teachers, the mantle that we ask for is that we want to be respected as an authority, we want to be listened to, we want our students to pay attention and do the things that we ask them to do, trusting that this knowledge that we have and this experience that we have will lead them to success. And that's a completely reasonable mantle to want. Sometimes that mantle of wanting that authority and that respect can lead to abuses of that it's like, ooh, I like feeling like I have authority or respect, and so I want that more, And if I ever become disrespected by my students or their colleagues, I'm really quick to defend that and to react to that because I don't want that to be taken away from me. Or maybe it's the fear that, oh, if people don't respect me as an authority, I won't have a full studio and I won't be successful. I certainly fell into that in the very beginning of my teaching. I was so concerned about what my students thought of me, or am I going to be a successful teacher? Or do they understand that I am qualified to teach them? Do they believe what I'm saying is true? And I think part of that was me worrying about that. Literally, do they believe what I'm saying is true? Are they going to really do what I ask because I want them to get better? But I think it was also like a kind of a subconscious worry, like, am I really qualified to do this job? Like, I have all this knowledge, but never taught before. So having knowledge and being a teacher, a successful teacher, are two completely different things. You can have all the knowledge in the world and not teach a darn thing. Books have all the knowledge in the world. Depending on how they're written, maybe they're going to be successful or not successful. It's all about how you deliver the message. That's a skill that has to be learned and cultured and matured and seasoned and all that. Sounds like I'm preparing lunch. So, again, back to this idea that egotism is the first thing to understand also comes from this fear that I just talked about. All this time in the beginning when I was worrying about, do my students believe that I have the authority to teach them, I was missing something really important about what they were bringing to me in the first lesson, or definitely the first couple of lessons, if not the first one. They were concerned about whether or not I thought they were good enough to study with me, which was baffling to me because anyone who wants to study with me is good enough to study with me. And I know that there are some teachers that don't believe in that, and I profoundly disagree with them. There are some teachers that want students to already be polished or to be really at a certain level before they'll teach them. And if they're not, then they don't want to waste their time. Not to be confused with a teacher that's really busy and has a ton of students and goes, I just don't really have the time to invest in this student that they need. That's different. I'm talking about the teachers that say, you got to audition for me. I got to make sure that you know what you're doing before I take you on. To me, that's just a sign of a really bad teacher, because you should be able to teach anybody. You really should be able to teach anybody. And if they have to already be, accomplished before they get to you, like, geez, is it because, there's that fear? I had that fear of, if my students get out there and they sing badly, that people will think I'm a bad teacher, and therefore I don't want to take on students that sound bad, air quotes. My first rule in my studio is that there are no bad sounds. And it's true that there are no bad sounds. The only time a sound's a bad sound is if you can't learn from it. And I instill this in my students, but they're still so nervous, especially in those first few lessons. They don't want to make a bad sound. And that leads to the second mantle. I mean, the first one, it's this enormous power to tell somebody whether or not you think they're good enough to study with you. But really what they're asking is, are they good enough to learn how to sing? They place this mantle on us, and we do it to other people all the time. We do it to our own teachers. They are the arbiter of truth. They are the supreme judge of voice. They know more. They possess some magical knowledge that listening to you once or twice, they're going to know whether or not, you're worthy. That's so stupid. I mean, because anyone who knows anything at all about singing knows that it takes years of work, of little bits of improvement here and there, steps forward, steps back, moving in a different direction, understanding this and that misconception was really this other thing. And it's really, really complicated, and it's really, really hard to become a professional singer, certainly, or of the caliber of singer that you could compete professionally. I mean, it takes an incredibly long time and an enormous amount of work. And so this idea that someone can listen to you for the first time, once or twice, and then just determine if you're going to, be successful or not is so stupid. Not for the person to have that fear or that feeling, but for somebody to perpetuate that because it's a lie. It's not true. It's not true. No one has that gift. They can listen to you once or twice and go, you're going to be successful. They can tell your potential. They can probably reasonably tell, based on their experience in their studio, how long it might take for you to get to where you want to go. And maybe say, based on your goals, you might want to extend your, your time frame a little bit. But there's still that mantle is there. You're this ultimate judge. And so if you approach your students with ego and you're not extremely careful to be humble and strike an appropriate balance, you could wound them. I've had students that come to me that are, it's later in life, they've retired and they want to pursue singing for a lot of different reasons. But most of them, I would say the lion's share of them that have come to me, had somebody tell them when they were younger that they were bad at singing, or that they sounded bad, or that they had no talent, or they couldn't sing in tune, or just whatever. You'd be better off whistling. You should stick to whistling. Stuff like that. Oh, God, it's just awful. It's awful. But I think, well, who cares what somebody said to you when you were 16 or 20? What do they know? And in this situation, those people are probably dead. It's kind of like maybe a little insensitive. I'm like, who cares? But they do. They care. They put enormous stock in that situation, consciously or subconsciously, because they put that mantle on that person at that time. They must know they're an authority, and, oh, I'm bad. I shouldn't do this, so I'm not going to pursue it. And then there's regret, and they go, oh, maybe I can pursue this. And then when they come to me, I have to be so careful to make sure that they understand that what that was a lie, and to not feed that even further. And it's not to say that I approach everything with kid gloves. Absolutely not. It's just I don't approach it with an ego. Or at least I'm very aware of my capacity to approach it with an ego. That's like kind of an obvious situation. Like if you approach that situation with a big ego and you're worried about, you need to understand how important I am and how skilled I am and how successful I am and, and establishing some kind of an authority, like you already have it and you don't need to do that. And I've seen teachers do that, and it seems obvious that would just be really detrimental to the whole process. And yet, power corrupts absolutely, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more influence we have, the more power we have, the greater the temptation for us to succumb to that. I don't think anyone really means to go about it that way intentionally. I think they just kind of fall into it and it's comfortable, which we'll talk about in a minute. But so that's obvious, don't be a jerk. Don't be egotistical. Sure, yeah. But the things that are I think more important to consider are the really subtle things. So I want to talk about that for a second. So some examples of some subtle things. The first example that I want to give comes from a really bad reason to be a teacher. And it is also something to be very aware of as a temptation. Accolades from your students, being celebrated by them. I mean, it feels great. I love it when my students say nice things. I'll get cards at Christmas sometimes and presents, and or on my birthday I'll get something special, or I know when I got my doctorate, several of my students that have been studying with me during that whole process got me little gifts and things. Like, it was really sweet, and I love that, and I don't know why anyone wouldn't. But that's not a reason to be a teacher, for a couple of considerations. One, you're going to treat the students that give you the accolades differently than the students that don't. And two, I've also had some of the most insulting things said to me by my students, So But there's something more subtle involved, and that's, if you are teaching because you want the accolades from your students, you run the risk of becoming friends with them. Because the closer that we get and the more familiar that we get with our students, and it's nice. I get a nice student who's always warm and bubbly and sweet and kind, and just a person that you'd love to have a cup of coffee with and hang out, and that's great. But you don't tell your friends the whole truth all the time, especially if you think it's going to hurt their feelings or make them upset. And what I mean by that is that as a teacher, our job is to critique our students. Our job is to tell them the things that they need to hear and do and learn to get better. And sometimes those things are not easy to say. Sometimes those things are not things that students want to hear. Whenever there's growth, there's letting go of something that you feel confident about that was wrong. I think for the most part, that approach was not the right way. Oh, I like that approach. No, you got to do it this way. You're taking away some confident thing and you're replacing it with an expectation, which means they've already failed and they're going to fail some more. And no one wants to have someone tell them that. And when you're friends with somebody, it's hard to tell people that as a teacher anyway. But it's hard to tell your friends that, especially because you want your friends to like you because you want to remain friends. You can never worry about giving students what they need for fear that they won't like you. And even if, and sometimes especially if it means they don't want to study with you anymore. Because I've had some students take a break. I don't think I was being a jerk. Maybe they think I was being a jerk. I don't think I was being a jerk. I was telling the truth. And they didn't like it. It made them uncomfortable. And they came back. I think that the biggest reason they came back is because they knew that I was telling them the truth and they could trust it. And so if you go into teaching for accolades and you want to be a really nice teacher and you want to be nice to your students and you want your students to be nice to you, and that all sounds really great and nice in theory until you have to tell them something that causes them to be unhappy and then they're not nice to you. Or you're afraid that they won't like you, and so then you're less apt to tell them. I'm much more concerned with telling my students what they need to hear than my fear that they won't like me. It's not that I don't worry about that. I don't think I would be a human being if I wasn't concerned about my students enjoying their experience in the studio and enjoying the rapport that we have. Of course. But I'm less worried about that and losing that than I am about not giving them what they need, even if it's not what they want at the current point in time. So another example of, silly me. Why is that egotistical? Because I'm putting my needs over my students. I'm putting my comfort over their needs. I'm saying I want this, I want to feel good more than I want to do my job as a teacher. And it doesn't feel egotistical, but it is. It is. So another example of something subtle is the opposite end. So you get a student who's a real jerk. I've had them more than I want. And, I think maybe part of it is that I'm pretty headstrong and I'm very forward and direct. And so if I got a student who's got an ego, we will butt heads really quick because I just don't have any respect for a diva. And I'll say that. I've said that to all my students. I'll say it continually. You come into my studio and you act like a diva, you're not going to have a good time here because I won't put up with it. I'm not going to boot them. I mean, I have done that twice. Instead, I take it as an opportunity to really help them grow. When I say I did it twice. In those circumstances, they just didn't want to follow like any of the rules, and they were a detriment to the rest of the students. And I said, take some time off. And I always left the door open, though. You always have to leave the door open because everyone has to have the opportunity to grow. Otherwise, what's the point? Usually I'll take the egotistical students as an opportunity to teach them why that's not going to be an effective use of their time. However, the temptation to be egotistical is probably easier to see is, I'm the authority, you need to listen to me, you need to follow the rules, And especially when you're doing something that's hurting the other students in my studio, ooh, I have every justification in the book to just be a real jerk, to be intense and mean and intimidating and unkind. I know that there have been times in the past, and it was egregious behavior by the student, you know, but it doesn't excuse. I had the temptation, and sometimes I succumb to it, of saying, I'm going to make sure that they know how that feels. I think the justification in my mind is, well, if they know how it feels to have somebody's thumb on them a little bit, maybe they'll back off with everybody else that they're trying to do that to. Stupid. It was very stupid of me to think that way, because it's expecting that person to be empathetic. When someone's being really egotistical, they're not being empathetic, and in fact, they're being incredibly insecure. So, if I put my thumb on them, they're just going to feel more insecure. They're not going to feel better about the situation. They're not going to have this reflective moment and go, he's putting his thumb on me because I'm doing it to other people. I mean, maybe at some point when they're out of the situation and they're in a place they're calm enough to go, I was being a jerk. But not in the moment. So those are some subtle instances of ego. And again, why is that ego, just to be clear? It's ego because I'm putting my feelings above the needs of the student. I'm treating them in a way that I'm expecting them to not treat everybody else, to try and teach them a lesson. I've never had any luck, and it's only come up a couple of times, but it never to any great success, no matter how much I felt like I was justifying it in my mind. So what's the solution? What's the answer? Well, I don't know if there's any one particular answer, but I do have a path of study that I have discovered that I think provides us with a way and a means to be much more sensitive to our own ego. And that sensitivity leads to less instances of our ego creeping into our lessons and messing up our trust built with our students. And it's going to happen because we're human. I'm human. I've messed up. I will continue to. It's just, can I raise the low bar instead of raise the high bar, So what is that way? What is that path? Well, Yoshokai Aikido, Budo study, as I've talked about in the past. And specifically in this instance, the relationship between shite and uke. So I'm going to finish with that. For those of you who don't know the relationship between shite and uke, Aikido is not a competitive martial art. Sorry, it's a cooperative martial art study, or cooperative Budo study. A Budo study is deeper than just understanding the technical aspects. It's also a way of building, a mental approach and emotional control over oneself, and just a general improving of the whole person through the study of a very specific thing. And I'll get into that more in the future. And there are some videos in the channel about that anyway. But in this partner study with shite and uke, shite studies on balance. They study how to deliver the technique, and to the outside eye, they look like they're winning. And uke studies off balance. They are the receiver of technique, and to the outside eye, they look like they're losing. We switch these partner roles back and forth pretty consistently, so we equally get to feel what it is to be on balance as it is to be off balance. But what's really special about this, what's really wonderful, is that as shite, I am learning how to be on balance and to best deliver the technique solidly to help uke study off balance. It's not for my benefit, but for uke's benefit. All of my effort is to help uke. And then when I'm uke and I'm studying off balance and I'm being thrown, I'm studying how to best be thrown and to best be off balance in order to help shite study on balance. I'm doing it for them. So I'm actively winning to help somebody else, and I'm actively losing to help somebody else. It's that whole perspective, that entire technique of both sides of knowing, I know what it's like to be in that position as uke, and so if I'm in this better position as shite because of the way that this person as uke is working, we can make a better fit. Or as uke, I know what it's like to be in a good position to stay in this technique, and maybe the person I'm working with isn't quite there. How can I adjust to help them study this technique better? It's a fantastic way of crushing your ego, because it's all about helping somebody else. It's all about empathy. It's all about compassion. And the temptations are there too. When I'm stay, if I want to barrel somebody in the mat, I can do that. Guess what's going to happen to me right after that? They're going to barrel me into the mat. So, you learn pretty quick that that doesn't work. The techniques also aren't very effective with ego. You can't muscle them because it's all about making fit and following what someone's giving you. There are a lot of there are a lot of debates on YouTube about the effectiveness of Aikido. I always kind of frame that into like the effectiveness of Aikido for what? Like for a cage fight? Because Aikido is the way of harmony. We would never be in a cage fight. We would never want to fight. It's not for that. The techniques are very effective. They come from a very long history of culture steeped in hand-to-hand combat for thousands of years. So I think making the claim that it's not effective contains a great deal of hubris. But what is it effective for? In this instance, for singing, it's really effective at presenting you that temptation to try and control a situation, force a situation, be dominant, and see the folly in that. Feel the folly in that by having that done to you and finding a better way. And so I'll give you two quick examples and then we'll call it, because this is the beginning of a series of videos on how to teach voice from an Aikido perspective. When I'm stay, if uke is being really resistant or really just not helpful, maybe they don't have a lot of energy in the technique, or they're just being really resistant to it, I will be softer with them instead of harder. I won't push harder. I will try and find a better way to help them off balance. I'll add the energy to the technique that they're lacking. We have the rule of 10 in Aikido. If your partner is giving you 2, you give them an 8. It should be 5 and 5, but sometimes it's not. Or if your partner is giving you an 8, you give them a 2. You give them a 2, you make fit. So if my partner is giving me a 2 and I give him an 8, it might jolt them into going, okay, I can give more energy, and then I'll back off until we find a meeting place, a balanced place. And I chuckle because I've had a lot of those situations with partners. All of a sudden you get the big eyes and they go, oh, geez, Same thing in the studio. Sometimes if a student comes in, they just have like no energy. They have a crummy attitude, crappy attitude. I will just turn on the energy and they feed off it. You can't do that all the time. That's not sustainable. If you're teaching 30 hours a week, and I know some that do, you will exhaust yourself. But, there's a time and a place. Or, if I'm dealing with a stay that's being really aggressive, as an example, I will, as uke, relax even more. I'll follow them even more. And if they're taking me down, I'll go down really easy. If somebody is really, if they're really off balance, if they're trying to control you or trying to force as stay, and you help them a lot because they're off balance, they'll stumble. Their technique won't be so great, and it'll be clearer to them. Oh, I'm trying too hard, and then it balances out. And the same thing happens in the studio. I'm not always stay as a teacher. Sometimes I'm uke. Sometimes I'm uke because maybe I picked up on some bad feeling or attitude or what have you from a previous student, and I just didn't let go of it and just kind of clear and center myself and go, okay, next lesson. And then my students will be like really on balance, mentally, emotionally. And I'll go, it's me. I'm the problem. Sometimes I'm uke on purpose. It's like, the student is giving me a crummy attitude. I'll let them teach the lesson. I'll let them fill in the blanks. I'll ask questions, but I'll let them answer them. And instead of me giving them the solutions, I'll have them give the solutions, and then we'll try it, and we'll see if it works. And then, should leave it up to the teacher. Sometimes, though, in those situations, we'll actually discover something together. They'll have the nugget of truth. That was it. Or maybe I've said that before, but that's the best way for them to understand that. Great. No one loses. It's not about winning and losing. It's about succeeding. And that relationship between teacher and student is a partner relationship, just as Shite and Uke is. Even though Shite seems to have a lot of power and Uke doesn't, it's not true. It's equal. It takes equal parts, equal energy, equal commitment. So the last thing that I'll leave you with, because it's a long video, is this patch that we wear. Is the Yata no Kagami. It's the mirror legend of Japan and one of the 3 imperial regalia. I won't get into that story because it's kind of long and complicated, and I would want to do it justice. And so what I'll say is what this represents is this idea and this etiquette, this philosophy of I will be the partner, I'll be the mirror image of the partner that I want, or I will be the best partner for my partner. I will mirror them, not in negativity but in positivity, so that they then mirror me, and we keep giving this bright, happy, and beautiful image. One of the reasons that our uniform is white is this bright, happy, open, as bright a space, as bright a light as you can make, and it's a reminder to train that way, and for me as a teacher to teach that way. So as a recap, the very first thing that you should consider before opening a private studio is ego. Check your ego. Really check it. Not for the obvious things, but for the subtle things. They will be there. If you destroy that trust with your student, and that the trust is the most important thing, because if they don't trust you, they're not going to do what you want them to do. You're not going to be a very successful teacher. I'm going to talk about this more in subsequent videos and give more examples of this, because I know that this video doesn't give maybe enough examples to drive this point home, but it starts a discussion. And that being said, if there's anything that you want to learn or any specific question you have, please put it in the comments below. And as always, don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. Our watermark, our logo is in the bottom corner of the screen. You can click that, or at the end of the video, you'll have some opportunities. And of course, check out the other content. There's a great deal of it. Thank you very much. Os!